So, I want to add a different perspective to a very sensitive conversation. I know right now, with everything that's going on, we're all saying that Black men need to hold other Black men accountable. And I'm not disagreeing with that, but I want to add a different question to the conversation because for something for us to even consider. Because what if they don't know what they're looking at? Yeah. Like, what if they don't know the difference between their homeboy, whether or not he's just tripping or if he's having a full blown mental health crisis? Yeah, because a lot of times none of us recognize the signs until it's too late. And now here we are, and we're collectively we're asking men to step in and check their friends, to intervene on our behalf, but we skip the step and we're not even considering this one thing that is so important, because you can't hold someone accountable if you don't recognize what you're looking for. And that's the piece that's missing. We are asking men to do something that we're not even sure if they recognize it. Do they know that not all dangerous behavior shows up as loud and obvious? That sometimes it just looks like extreme jealousy framed as love, or isolation from friends and family, or just sudden mood swings and changes. Maybe they don't know that their homeboy is looking obsessive or controlling or paranoid, because some of the shit that we're experiencing, that we show these symptoms, we've normalized so much of it because we've been in survival mode. So now we're trying to get folks to intervene, and we're trying to get them to intervene without having the language or the framework or the tools in order to intervene. And unfortunately, in our community, we all wait until something happens, after violence, after the headlines, after another woman has been murdered, before we start, and then you start hearing things. He seemed fine. He was a good guy. I can't imagine why he did that, you know, but the signs were there. Collectively, we just didn't know how to read them, because we got used to treating mental health as a reaction and we never consider it as prevention. And that is where I want this conversation to take a shift from, good men versus bad men, because that shit is too simple. It's way too simple of a conversation, because some of these men are dysregulated, untreated, unhealed, and surrounded by other men who are equally unequipped. Hell, they could be surrounded by women that are equally unequipped. So now we have a whole circle of people trying to manage something that they were never taught to identify. And I'm talking not just about men, I'm talking about us women as well. And again, like, we have to shift the conversation into more actionable terms. One of the terms I want to say is we have to normalize mental health as preventive care. The same way we go to the doctors for our body, we need that same energy when it comes to our minds, when it comes to our emotions. We need to normalize that shit. We need to learn the signs collectively. We can't just depend on the therapist or the clinicians. We need to have some type of community level awareness, to recognize emotional dysregulation, escalation patterns, what controlling behavior looks like, what's, having a bad day versus being in withdrawal and isolation. We need to be able to recognize those signs in our own community. I'm a firm believer in we need to get mental health first aid. Start treating it like CPR. Basic training to recognize crisis, knowing when to step in versus when to call for help. And having the language that doesn't escalate a situation is also part of mental health first aid. And it's a free class that we can take in most states. Because I know we love to use the term, check on your mans, because it sounds good, but what if they don't know how? And honestly, this is a community health crisis. It's not about just men protecting women. This is about all of us learning how to be safe for each other, recognizing the early signs and having real conversations, and not dismissing behaviors as that's just the way he is, or that's just the way she is, or not calling a thing a thing. Because safety for all of us is not about just physical, it's emotional and psychological. And a lot of us were never taught how to recognize any of it. So, yeah, collectively, as a community, we all need to check our mans. So, yeah, hold people accountable. Absolutely. I'm not disagreeing there. But if we really want to stop burying our women and watching our men go to jail, we gotta go deeper than accountability. We need to include awareness. We need tools. We need prevention to be part of this conversation because you can't stop what you were never taught to see. And that's unfortunate because a lot of us were never taught to see it. So it's the brown girl, created a brown girl experience. I just wanted to add another perspective to this conversation. And so hopefully you can find it helpful. And I think I am going to follow up with another video defining different types of safety and maybe giving some tools because one of the things that I realized talking to different men and women, they don't know how to define safety for them. Yeah. And a lot of times they don't know how to define it because they never seen it growing up. They never experienced it growing up. Their mothers and their fathers, they never experienced safety just because of the world that we've all had to learn to survive in. So much of what you would think would be second nature has never been experienced. So I'm gonna do a follow-up video teaching us how to name it. All right, it's the Brown Girl, created a Brown Girl experience, and this is another episode of Miss Education of a Brown Girl. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.